So, you went from there to the Smokejumpers, or what happened next?
I went from basically what happened was in the fall of '76, I went just before I got off the crew. I was making out my application to the jumpers, and I went down and we were having our exit interviews, and Tommy Anaker, who was either crew leader or squad boss there, was sitting there, and we were working for a guy named Ken Uckel, who I got to know who he was later. He'd been on the Kootenai, and he interviewed us, and we had the exit interview, and he wrote some stuff down, and Anaker looked at it, tore it up, and said, "Ken, if he wants to get on the jumpers, he can't have this, he's kind of okay. You got to talk like he walks on water. So I'm going to give you another sheet, and you fill it out and say he walks on water." And Uckel looked at him, and Tommy goes, "Fill it out." And Uckel did. He said, "Well, he basically walks on water." And then he gave it to me, and of course I made 1,000 copies of it, and I submitted it with my application to the jumpers. Then that fall, and the reason why I remember this is I was leaving a little bit early because I was in a program through the University of I was going to the University of Montana, and I've got a sister who's lived in Paris since the 60s, 68 or so, and so because of that, I have family who's French, and so I had taken French classes. Well, when I found out they were doing a deal where you could go to France as part of the university program, well, I signed up for it. I thought, this has got to be great. I was, at this time, I'm 23, 24 years old, not your conventional college student, and I'm thinking, well, I'm here to just enjoy all the things that all my friends did while I was trudging around with the M16, and so the bottom line was I signed up for that, and I was sitting in the kitchen of a house in France with the family that was keeping me, and they said, "Oh, you got this letter?" And I opened it up, and it was a letter inside of a letter inside of a letter. And I kindly got to the letter itself, and says, "Oh, by the way, you've been selected as a smoke jumper." And I let out this scream that it was like a Sunday dinner or Saturday dinner or something. Everybody was in the kitchen. I let out this yell, and the whole family just, what the, and so that's how I got back, and.
So your new man year was 77?
It was 77, and boy, I was lucky because I came back with a French girlfriend in tow, not in the best shape of my life, and, I was young and pretty fit, but it was a little touch and go in there for a while because, training, it's just hard, and I'm sure a lot of these guys have been training for months, and, I trained for some weeks, a couple of weeks, but I wasn't in the best of shape, and so I very luckily, made it, and one time I actually fell off the overhand rope, and actually my hamstring, where my hamstring was on my right leg, was just this blazing bruise, from falling off the overhand rope, where you cross the gully there, and anyway, I didn't think I was going to make it, and I went in, and I was I was afraid they were going to go, and I went and cornered a fight on the steps going down to the basement at the loft, and said, "I'm going to do this fight. You give me a chance. You let me do this. I'm going to make it. Even though I'm gimped up, I'm going to make it. Fight. Of course, fight." He didn't say anything. He just kind of looked at me up and down and turned around and walked away. But they did give me a chance, and I made it. Even though I was pretty gimped for quite a while.
Was that before your first jumps?
Yeah.
So how'd those go?
First jump was a classic. They took us out to Blue Mountain, and we were in the Doug, and the air was actually fairly rough. We were bouncing around in there. We didn't know, and of course you don't know in a Doug. There's not really much to hold on to. You're kind of back, there. And anyway, my first ever jump was my squad leader was Floyd Whittaker. Now, I don't need to tell anybody who listened to this who Floyd Whittaker is. I mean, anyway, I was terrified of the guy. He looked so scary, Plus he had a twin. Even if you killed him or something, then there's another one that's going to come and get you. So I was just terrified. Anyway, the deal was that, plus WW2 was on my squad.
And that WW2 is?
Wayne Williams II, and he was always giving these guys shit, which I could not believe. So they were always pissed at my squad because WW could take anything they could hand out to him, so anyway, enough said. But we were in the dug, and I don't know who was in front of me, but I was in back, and you know how it works. Guy in front's like this, you're behind him like this, ready to step in. Well, just as he went out the plane, we hit some huge bump, and I fell backwards against the bulkhead of the plane. And I looking at it going, should I go? Should I stay? I didn't know what to do. They never told us this. And I looked and I couldn't hear anything, but I saw Whittaker, who was the spotter, and he was just looking at me, and he just mouthed the words. and I just looked at him and went, yes, sir! Boom! And I jumped out just like Superman. I went out of the plane, hands first, diving out as fast and as hard as I could. I didn't have any twists. It was amazing. And I opened up, and there I was on Blue Mountain, and it was rough air and really blowing. And, I came down and just barely missed a fence. We were blowing all over the place. And I just barely missed a fence, but it was good. And I was on the ground, And the great thing about that is I never even once thought about my gear, never thought about anything. I just didn't want Floyd to rip my arms off, and so I was out of the plane, and that was that.
Did you get any tree landings when you were practice jumping or training?
Sure, I think we did. In fact, they used to throw you into the trees.
And then what about water? Did you do water jump?
We did do a water jump, which everybody makes a big deal of. It was like, we landed, chute drapes over you, pass it over yourself, and then you just backstroke for shore. It wasn't any big deal. For some people, I think they think it's a really big deal. Maybe I'm not afraid of the water or something, but it was, you're bobbing like a cork, and it's just a pond at 9 Mile. How bad can it be? And so. So
that was 77, your first year, and that was. Did you go up to Alaska that year?
Probably.
Yeah.
I went everywhere. My first jump though was in Yellowstone Park on the west thumb of the lake. And it was a pretty cool jump. We jumped in this meadow that was full of elk. At least they told me it was full of elk. I was so fixed on what I was doing that I never saw them. But I went with Claremont, Warehane, and another foreman or, squad leader, There were 4 of us. And I think they thought it was such a good deal that they all jumped on and took the jump. And then I just happened to be on the list somewhere, so they took me too. But yeah, that was my first jump, and it was great. The only thing that was kind of spooky about that one was they sent me, of course, they're, what it's like with foreman, 2 squad leaders, who's going to do most of the work. They sent me down with piss pumps to fill them in these kind of really shallow ponds, and I get down to this pond, and I'm starting to dip water, and I look beside me in the mud, and there's this grizzly track about, I don't know, probably this big, not a huge grizzly track. I'm all by myself, just with a canteen cup just filling these piss pumps anyway. So that was good. It was all good. So
any other, did you have a lot of fires that year, or what do you remember about that first year?
I think 77 was not a great year. It was a moderate year, and but I got 5 or 6 fire jumps, I think, because I remember jumping in West, and I jumped out of Cave Junction once too, which was another amazing jump. The guys put me, I don't tell them a lot of stories, but the guy put me in the airplane, and these guys, Dark 30, we're in the airplane, and we're over Klamath Lake, and we may have dropped 2 already on a fire. We go beyond Klamath Lake, and he looks down, and here's this snag that's got to be 300 feet tall. And all around it, kind of a circle around it, is a bunch of reprod, and then there's older trees, maybe not really old. And he said, go for the reprod. Yeah, so he puts me in the door, and we were jumping one-man sticks, I think, and he pulls back, goes, go for it. So I jump out, I open up, I look down, I'm already at this snag. And I say to myself, and this is me, I said, just try and hook that snag, because you never hit what you're aiming at. And, it'll put you close to the thing when you get down to the bottom. So I did. I actually torqued around the snag, staying really close to it, kind of saying to myself, I'm trying to hit this thing, but I, was already past the top of it, and I'm circling, and anyway, I get down low, and I kind of look, and I see this mess of reprod here, and as I look, I'm below the canopy on the next section. So I just let the toggles up and just shot right out from the reprod and actually landed in a kind of an opening under the other trees. And the other guys all landed in this reprod, and they were like 6 hours getting their shoots out of that stuff. Anyway, I got back to Cave Junction. The guy goes, man, that was like one of the coolest jumps I've ever watched. You really must be a really experienced. I said, no, this is my second fire jump ever. He went, what? I shouldn't have thrown you on that. You didn't tell me. I said, nobody asked me. So anyway, but it was just pure idiocy and luck.
Well, that reprod, how tall do you think that was? The rest of them.
The guy, it was like 25 feet.
Yeah.
Because it's just awful for getting a parachute out of,
Yeah.
I mean, nothing hung up in it, draped over it. It was like 25, but the trees around it were probably more like 80.
Yeah.
And so the deal was that, there was enough space for me to drive out of the reprod under the trees,
Wow.
The other trees, well, I mean, I just saw open ground. I didn't know.
How'd you get the snag down?
Which snag?
The one that was burning.
It wasn't that. It wasn't burning snag. No,
oh.
it was the fire. This was the only place.
Oh,
well,
okay.
you know how it is. It's a Klamath.
Oh, I thought
it's the only place where you could get people down was this reprod.
Yeah.
And so he picked that, and the fire was somewhere.
Someplace else. Okay.